I'm not sure what to do with my hands.
Be good just to hold them down by your side. Yeah, great.
Well, we're real happy with what was going on, and at the end of the day, you got to be happy.
What did you say his name was again?
His name is Ricky Bobby.
Ricky Bobby? He's got 2 first names.
Whatever the hell his name is, let's get him over here.
Everything ended up fine.
Yeah, okay, everything was fine. Thanks. Great job, Ricky. Good job in the car. Ricky Bobby, a force to be reckoned with possibly in the near future.
All right, welcome back to another week of Muskies on Tap. I'm your host, Gus Max. You may be able to hear that got a new mic, and Max got a new mic as well. We will not be joined by the other member of Muskies on Tap, Brian Eckel. He had to get up early, couldn't make it on tonight. We're recording pretty late. It's Sunday night after the PMTT, and we got some good news for everyone. Max and I were able to squeeze out a 5th place finish, get in the top 10 again this year. That's pretty cool. We'll touch way more on it this whole episode. I think this whole one's going to be dedicated to the PMTT. We don't really have much of a structure other than just going from pre-fishing to this morning. I hope you guys enjoy, and before we get any further, I'll introduce the other Muskies on Tap member here tonight, and that's Max Manti. How you doing tonight, Max?
Yeah, I'm doing good. I'm feeling a little loopy right now after this weekend. That was a lot of work. It was we got the absolute extremes weather-wise. We were kind of dogging it on Thursday, Friday, and Saturday with some pretty hot, muggy, sunny conditions, and then everything changed today. We were soaking wet, battling 25-mile-an-hour winds. Pretty much poured rain most of the day. I don't know if it hit 55 degrees out there as well. So shout out to everyone who made it through those conditions today. They were pretty gnarly at some points. But yeah, I'm excited to kind of just riff this episode. It's not going to have the kind of same structure as we normally do. It just sounds like we'll be recapping our weekend, and I'm really excited to do that. A lot to talk about. Unfortunate that our other co-host Brian couldn't make it. Apparently he just played way too much golf this weekend, so he was pretty tuckered out, which is pretty on par for Brian. So he'll be back, I'm sure, next week, and we'll be able to poke fun at him a little bit more then. But let's get into it. It's late. I'm excited to kind of recap though, and let's get her going.
Yeah, for sure. I think before we get a little further into it, I'd like to congratulate the winners, Mark and Nate. They pounded really big fish this morning. I think they got all 3 of theirs within, I think they were saying on the podium, like 45 minutes or an hour or something crazy like that. They bagged a 52 3/4, a 45, and a 44. So congrats to them. Those are some absolute tanks. And then also on the leaderboard, representing Eagle River, we got Jeremy and Trevor Barber. Those are huge fish. Congrats to them for bringing those in. That's huge for giving them a shot to go into the championship. And I think that's back-to-back years for the Barbers. And I believe last year was the first year that Jeremy and Trevor were a team. So huge congrats to them. That's big time.
Yeah, I think they got big fish of the day on Saturday, right? And then they bagged another nice one today. They had a 45.5 on Saturday and a 46 1/4, 46 1/2 today. So that's an impressive weekend for sure. And yeah, seeing the picture of that 52 3/4 was like jaw dropping. I can't remember the last time I've seen a Wisconsin fish that big that didn't come out of Green Bay. So that was pretty cool to know that, we were on some water that actually held that big a fish, that type of caliber of fish. And obviously we didn't really get to lay eyes on one that big, but it was cool to see some really nice fish come out. I think overall it was a pretty successful weekend, I think, for the Madison chain. I don't know if the numbers were quite there like people thought, but size definitely was, and that's always fun to see. But yeah, that picture of that 52 3/4, that was ridiculous. That fish was not only long, but man, was she heavy too.
Right. Yeah. And looking at the picture with all the gear they have on and all that wind, I mean, you would have thought that was like end of November or something holding that fish.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, not only that one was caught, but there was a handful of other ones today. I mean, it was well, I guess we'll kind of dive back into it, but today just I mean, geez, with that weather, like it was just a big fish day through and through. I mean, there was another one over 50 caught, a few upper 40s. So yeah, if you were able to get out there and battle those, or I guess it goes to show if you're able to get out and battle some elements and time it up right, big fish are a whole different breed. I feel like a muskie, and I think they kind of proved that today when they started chomping.
Yeah, not a single fish under 40 caught today. All
Crazy,
big fish, all big fish.
crazy. Well, let's just I guess kick it off on Wednesday when you got down there, and then I'll hop in when I got down there on Thursday.
Sure. Yeah, I'll start with Wednesday. I got in probably around 4 p.m. Didn't leave super early. Had to pack in the morning still. Got down there and decided to just get on Monona for a little bit. That was the closest lake, and I knew I was going to be picking up some buddies later from downtown. So without really knowing too much, I mean, I got some insights from a couple buddies. That really helped for sure to get some starting points on some spots. I decided to troll still just because that's a pretty good way to cover water and kind of mark out either weed lines or deep weeds or bait fish. That was a game plan right away, and I was graced with the floating weeds they have there. Wasn't making it easy to troll. I don't know how those guys were trolling during the tournament with all the floating weeds. I was already getting frustrated from just trolling and pre-fishing. So hats off to you guys for I know one of the trolling teams did make the top 10, so that was pretty crazy. But I didn't see much on the first night. I was mostly, well, I don't know if any of these three guys are gonna listen. But I was kind of doing like the guide role, the babysitting role once they got on the boat. I was just handing them the rod and telling them to cast this way and some random area in Monona I've never fished. We just had to stay out of the wind because the winds were actually pretty gnarly on Wednesday, and I didn't want somebody going in the water. But there's weeds everywhere, bait everywhere. Everything seemed right, but we didn't move a fish. So there's not too much to tell on Wednesday. I didn't really expect much. I don't think I was out there for more than a couple hours really. But with that, we kind of knew in pre-fishing, since we've never been to this system, we wanted to spend some time on both Monona and Wabisa. So I went straight to Wabisa the next day, and I think I didn't get out until later in the morning because I was finishing up the podcast from last week. I think as well I got out there and started trolling. I also didn't know what to expect on Wabisa. I didn't know. I was told that there's like a weed line out there somewhere in that 10, 11 feet or so, but I didn't realize that there was going to be even deeper weeds than that. So I was a little confused on where to troll right away, and I kind of stuck to like a 9, 10 to 12-ish edge, and I think I only scored on a few pike. I actually got you can troll three lines out there, and I was trolling solo with three, and I got a double on pike. Both the down rods went off at the same time, and I just see two pikes swirling there because I was short line trolling those shallow weeds, and I was like, oh, well, kind of cool, but that was tough to do on my own. But so pretty much after those two, somewhat solo, a little help from friends, outings, I didn't have a whole lot to go off of. I kind of marked out a few spots on Wabisa there on Thursday, and really the fun didn't begin until Max got there when we started casting, and that's when we really started honing in on some spots. So I don't know if you
Yeah,
want to touch on something there, Max.
sure. Yeah, I mean, I showed up later on Thursday afternoon. I think at that time we'd been pretty much in constant communication, and it didn't really sound like you were, quote unquote, fishing very hard. More so just scouting and doing a little bit of trolling. So, when I showed up, I'm understand the importance of scouting new water, obviously, but it's I wouldn't say it's on the top of my things to do. It's growing on me as far as the tournament aspect goes. I understand how important it is, but I don't get out to fish as much as you do. And so, when I'm out on the water, it's like, man, I just really, really want to try to, catch some fish. Right. And so, I stayed patient. We did some good scouting there for a little bit to start our afternoon. We mapped out a few spots and kind of tried to figure out a few areas. But yeah, I mean, we started when we started casting, it was almost like instantaneous when we started moving fish, and things got pretty exciting pretty quickly. I think the funny thing to touch on with the pre-fishing more than anything is the fact that, when we started casting, I looked at you and I was like, all right, so what's the protocol here? If I have a fish coming in hot on the 8, am I pulling the bait out of the water or am I trying to catch it? And you told me pretty point blank, like we are not trying to catch these fish right now. We are pulling baits out of the water. You kind of set the ground rules for us. So that was good, and we'll touch on why that was very good for us here in a second. But yeah, I mean, it was pretty quick. I think our first pass, you moved a really nice fish, and came off of one of those deep weed edges that I think a lot of people were fishing this weekend that we saw. And then shortly after that, I think we kind of stumbled across a shoreline that, maybe we had recognized from a YouTube video or something of that nature. And we were thinking about what to throw. And I remember you'd gotten this new chatterbait, this like 12-inch chatterbait. We're like, well, this could probably play here. And on that one particular shoreline, you ended up moving, I think it was like 5 muskies. And I think during that time, we're like, oh man, we found it. We figured it out in the span of 30 minutes that we were on cloud 9. We're like, holy crap, the fish are here. We have the bait. And I guess to expand on one particular fish that I think we revisited again on Saturday morning, luckily.
Yeah, that one particular fish was pretty funny. We were casting off opposite sides of the boat, and I know there was a few other fishermen in the area, and I could tell that they were in the tournament pre-fishing. And this was, I don't know, 5-10 minutes after we went through our protocol on what to do with hot fish in the 8. Because I mean, obviously, if they hit out in the cast, there's nothing you can do but set the hook and bring them in. Like that's no problem. But I put on that new chatterbait, and I think this was the first fish that I raised on it. It might have been the second, I can't remember, but I know it was like the first spot. And a low 40s just comes flying in, and obviously I kind of panic because it's in between. Like my brain is calculating on what to do. I'm like, this fish is gonna eat, but we got a tournament in 2 days. So I do like a lazy 8, fish is still following. Or sorry, I do a lazy first turn, fish is still following. I think I go into my second turn pretty lazy too, kind of just acting nonchalant. I probably should have taken it out at this point. The fish comes up and pretty much engulfs the entire bait hole. I mean, I could see just the front end. And at this point, I think this is when Max off the other, I don't say a word because there's people around and it is not that windy. And Max turns around and I think he just pretty much saw the fish come and turn and eat the whole entire bait. And I just kept the line in the water, did not keep it tight, let the fish spit it out, swim right back down and go on to the next cast like nothing even happened.
Yeah, that was ridiculous, man. I remember I don't know why I even turned around. Like I must have saw you maybe twitch or something, or caught something out of the corner of my eye, and I turned back and there's like you said, a low 40s fish with half your bait in its mouth, and you're not doing anything, and all of a sudden you just see the lure just spit back out. Fish kind of, belly rolls a little bit and swims away, and you just kind of look at me, and and in my head I'm like, I don't know if I would have been able to I would not have had the strength to just let a low 40s fish eat my lure without doing anything, letting it spit it back out, and then just take another cast like absolutely nothing happened. That was ridiculous. It goes against everything in our nature, but we're getting into this tournament stuff. Not for you, maybe not for you, but for me. So I'm getting into this tournament stuff. I think the proof was in the pudding this weekend of how important that particular, I guess, sequence was. But I think it was like 5 minutes later, I was throwing a mini grenade and a fish came in, kind of same deal where like my brain just completely malfunctioned. And I know you were proud of me. I think I took the bait out of the water with like 4 feet left and the fish peeled off and we put another waypoint down and kept moving on. Like nothing, like you said, like nothing happened. I mean, there were a handful of other boats in the area that were, fishing that clearly were going to be in the tournament. So, it was kind of like a sport within the sport. Like pre-fishing and not trying to catch muskies is hilarious. It's almost like when you're not trying to catch them, they just decide to try to go kamikaze and eat. And then when pressure's on and you got to catch them, it's like where the hell did they go? But
Right.
that was a really fun night. I mean, we ended up moving, I think, like 9 fish, and
Mm-hmm.
most of them were in a particular area that we ended up spending a lot of time in during the tournament. But I mean, I don't want to speak for you, but we felt awesome after Thursday night. I mean, the people that we were in communication with during the tournament, we're doing well pre-fishing too. We were seeing pictures of them catching fish and saying that they were getting follows. And so I think after Thursday night, I mean, we felt that the tournament as a whole was going to be numbers, like it was going to be like more of a shootout than it would be kind of a grind fest, which it ended up ultimately being. But it just felt like those lakes were completely loaded with fish, like we had heard about. It felt like every spot that we went to, we were either seeing a fish, in some capacity. So yeah, it was a really promising start. And I think Friday morning, we both decided to, I guess, just kind of take it easy. We felt like we had a game plan kind of formulated just after a pretty short amount of time of pre-fishing. Friday morning, we went over and checked out Monona. Really, the only highlight from that was seeing that like absolute mega giant just sunbathing on the shoreline,
Mm-hmm.
which was crazy. I mean, maybe it was one of the fish that ended up being caught, who knows. But I saw it on the surface and I was just like, oh my God, that's a 50-inch muskie right there. And it was just, sticking its nose out of the water, swimming around. I threw a few baits at it because again, like I don't fish enough and I don't have enough chances to catch a fish of that size that I'm not gonna go ahead and just try to catch that thing when I'm staring right at it.
I don't blame you, man.
Yeah, obviously that one didn't eat. That would have been cool. But yeah, I mean Friday kind of same deal. We went to Monona. You can touch on it a little bit more, but I think both of us felt that we were pretty confident in the areas we found on Wabisa to grind out a few fish. And I think we didn't spend enough time on Monona to really learn it. It's a big body of water. And so really after just a few hours, we kind of both were like, let's go back to Wabisa, look for some more bait, maybe try to find another B, C, and D type spots for the tournament and, drink some beer, eat some food, and get some sleep at that point.
Right. Yeah. We just weren't really finding what we were looking for on Monona. And I really think it was kind of a blessing in disguise that I didn't end up moving anything on Wednesday night so that there's nothing to go back on. And then when we went back to Monona on Friday to pre-fish, we ended up going there at probably the worst time possible. I don't think there was a breath of wind and it was maybe 80 some degrees. We were marking some bait. We were kind of reconvening with some of our buddies and saying like, oh yeah, that's about kind of the depth we were seeing that at. But we were casting and we were not moving fish other than the one that you saw visually. So that's what kind of deterred us from staying there and going back to Obisa to mark out, like you said, our B, C, D, etc. type spots. And I'm sure if we stuck it out at Monona, there's a chance we could have moved a fish, a couple fish, maybe another big fish, and that would have made our decision a lot harder. But at this point, we really knew what we had to stick to, and that's just what we had all those fish to go back on. I think I'll quick touch on one more of a fish that you did a great job on pulling the bait out. It can't go without saying on this one, but Max was ripping a tube, and I think it was not long after I told him, or maybe I told him multiple times, I'm like, when you throw a tube on, they either hit it or they don't. And then he gets a fish up in the 8, which is, it's not as likely with the tube. They're usually gonna smack it or stay away from it. And this thing comes up, as hot as all could be. And I think you did maybe a turn and then you took it out of the water. And this fish came so close to jumping 2 feet out of the water to eat the tube. I mean, it had his nose on the surface and just like halted and then swam straight back down. I'm like that fish was gonna eat. I mean, I think we had three or four. I mean, the one with the bait in its mouth, one where you took it up, the grenade out of the way of the fish, like before even the figure eight, the tube one. And I think I had like a 33 or 34 incher come in hot on that chatterbait as well. And I just took the bait out of the water. That, I don't know. That's definitely a crazy thing to do. It's not unheard of. There's plenty of people that pre-fish without even putting a line in the water, which I think was something that I was leaning more towards. But thankfully, Max was leaning more towards the casting, because without casting, we weren't at least figuring out what these fish wanted to follow and eat. And I think that really helped us in the tournament kind of pick our baits.
Well, I think like we have a good balance in that sense because, and I'm sure these are for you too, but like for me, I mean, fishing in the PMTT stuff is a little bit like vacation. It's like a fishing vacation. I get to, go out and fish for 3-4 days away from my normal job. So I guess like I was saying before, it just kind of goes against all my instincts of fishing is when like you find like you pound the pavement, you work really hard to get a muskie to even look at a bait. And then, when you have it happen during pre-fishing, you got to just take the bait away from the fish. It feels so counterintuitive. It's almost kind of funny. I ultimately didn't catch a muskie this weekend, which, we'll get to, but in my brain, it's like, I kind of caught two muskies just in a weird way.
Yeah, we
I
caught
don't know.
muskies. It's a team effort, man. I mean,
Yeah.
we
Yeah. I
netted
guess that's
both,
true.
and our names are on it. It's our team, so no
Yeah.
matter
So
what.
I would say Friday night, I don't know how you were feeling, but I guess I do know how you were feeling. We were feeling good. Like we were talking in the hotel before the night. We had a really good game plan on what we were gonna do. Felt clear. We felt pretty confident in the baits that we had chosen for the next day. Like I said, talking with kind of our friends at the tournament, it seemed like fish were moving around and things were going good. So we were fired up. We felt like we really had to put, a hurting on them the next day in order to kind of stay in it. And Saturday morning started, and typical musky fishing, things kind of changed.
Yeah, like you said, we had a really good game plan and we were moving a bunch of fish, and we really thought it was going to be a numbers tournament, and we thought we just had to get the ground rolling and just start catching fish. So we went to our, one of our A1, I think we had like two A1 spots about. I mean, one was for sure a long drift. And well, something very important. I know we both agreed the night before that we were giving this first spot an hour and a half. Like we were pretty explicit about that. And when we get to it in the first in the morning, I think did you or me move one like in the
I
first
moved
couple
a, sm-
minutes?
I moved a small one about 4 minutes into the tournament, but
Yeah, so we
probably would
moved
have
it.
been scoreable.
Yeah, we were putting so many waypoints down in this area. I was starting to like forget which fish was which, but yeah, so we moved one right away and definitely felt good about our choice on the spot. And I think we kind of get done with it, and it was about an hour into the tournament, and I think I might have kind of suggested maybe we should go, and I think you were saying no, 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 we gotta turn around, head back to that, cluster of waypoints. We got to give that, the hour and a half, like we said, till about 8:30. And I think at this point I switched lures because I didn't want to go back over it with the same lure. I'm not sure what you were throwing at this point. You might have gone back to the mini grenade potentially
Mm-hmm.
or
Yep.
something like that. And I throw on a tube, which recently has been doing really well for me. I got the fish in Cave Run. I got the fish in league just this last week. So I throw that on with confidence. I actually, to be honest, didn't even throw it at all during pre-fishing because I was worried that it would just catch. To be honest, those things are just fish catching machines. And that's kind of why we chose blades more so to move fish. But anyways, so I get the tube on and we get back to those cluster of waypoints, and then I got rocked about halfway back, just out of absolute nowhere. I mean, I think I was doing up rip, up rip, up rip. I go to do a side rip, and just halfway into the rip, I just get stopped dead cold in my tracks. And as soon as I set the hook, that thing goes just flying airborne, and then all hell breaks loose. I mean, I don't think it was windy. I think it was dead calm and sunny. We were out of the major. There was absolutely nothing going on. But after catching that first fish, we did realize about 5 to 10 minutes later, there was a wind pickup. So that fish must have fed right before that wind pickup. But
You even said it was about to get tough about five
yeah, oh
minutes
yeah.
before you caught the fish. You said out loud to me, you go, just hang on, just hold on to your horses here. It might get a little bit dead for a bit. And I was like, we'll see.
I mean, if you got to admit, it felt like it. I think that's why I was wanting to, for some reason, change spots at like 8, because by the time that major got done in the morning, it just felt dead. I don't know. That's usually how it feels when the sun's out and there's no wind, but you just got to stay with your game and don't start, getting all the screws loose in your head and go doing random stuff. We stuck with it. And so, yeah, that fish came into the net really clean. He had a nice net on that. And we were absolutely stoked with that one. I think we were dapping each other up, and I think you might have let out a nice little hoot and holler.
Yep, per usual. Those tournament fish, I've said it many times. Those tournament fish just hit a little different.
Oh, they sure do. So this first fish was 41 3/4. Released that and checked down at the maps. And this one was in the cluster of that fish that engulfed my entire bait. And I didn't set the hook during pre-fishing and let go. And it was the same size. Max and I are,
Same bars, same weight. I'm like you couldn't convince me it wasn't the same fish.
we are thoroughly convinced that that was the same fish. So taking hooks away from a fish in the figure 8 pre-fishing absolutely paid off for us, big time.
Yeah.
And that was 8:25 a.m. Right before we were gonna cut it off of that spot. So that was just almost perfect. It's just got the spirits really high. Catching a fish early in a tournament is awesome. I mean, sometimes it's a good or a bad thing. Start hot and then it's just dead for the rest of the time. But I mean, catching any fish in a tournament it's just awesome.
Something I was thinking about on my drive home is, it's crazy to think like tournaments are so different because, there's so many boats taking off on a body of water where, you're a little bit more limited. You kind of ultimately end up sticking around areas that you feel confident in and you fish them over and over again. That's kind of been our motto since we've started doing these tournaments. It's really worked out well for us. And it's kind of funny because when we go and fish, just for fun, with our buddies or whatever, and we would go through a spot like we did in the tournament that morning, and we wouldn't, say we don't move any fish or we don't move the fish that we saw the day before, we'd probably pull up and go to the next spot. Rarely do we, swing around on a spot that we had never moved, that we didn't move a fish the last hour on, change baits, and then hit it again from a different angle. I was thinking about that. It's like, should we start doing that more often when we're just fishing for fun?
Yeah,
because
big time.
it's worked out really well in tournaments for us. And if it was just, you, Brian, and I out there on the Madison chain, messing around, there's a 0% chance that we'd go through that spot, turn around, and go right back through the same spot with different baits and think we were going to get a different result. And we did. And
Right.
It's just, it was so kind of a weird light bulb moment. I was driving home and I was like, maybe we should start doing that more often.
Yeah, I think I completely agree. And definitely the changing casting angles is huge. I mean, I can't tell you how many people, tournaments out here in the chain, just anywhere up north here. I mean, and obviously I'm super guilty of it too, but they just get up on a weed line walk towards the shore or in that general direction and bring their bait back. And both the fish from this weekend came from having the boat in tight and casting out. Neither fish was from casting in or down. I mean, another good one to do is going parallel down a weed line. And I know you're doing that a bunch from the front of the boat, which is an amazing tactic as well. But yes, both of these were from pitching out.
Well, that's just it. Is like you end up fishing at all these different angles in tournaments because you're hitting the spot, from the outside in, from the inside out, parallel. So you're like thoroughly working the area. And like you said, I mean, that fish didn't respond to, an outside in, and then we turn around and it responds to an out, inside out, way of casting. And we, I think it's funny too, because it almost sometimes makes a little bit more sense in your head. It's difficult to walk a bait down a weed line to the boat. Now, obviously the bait tends to get higher in the water column the closer you bring it to the boat. And when your boat's in the deepest water, it's almost doesn't really make sense. Whereas if you're fishing inside out on a weed edge, you can cast out, let the bait sink, and then walk it kind of up the weed edge as it gets closer to the boat. So if you're able to fish an area like we were, it almost makes more sense sometimes to fish it inside back out. And if you're choosing baits appropriately, like a tube or a grenade that you can let sink and then bring it up, like we were throwing, it just, I don't know. I guess I was kind of just racking the brain on the way home about kind of the angle changes, why we ended up fishing it twice, and how it ended up paying off.
Yeah, those are great thoughts, Max. I mean, that's just money advice for everyone out there on fishing a spot twice through, pretty much. I mean, if you're seeing what you like, you got to go hit it again. I mean, even if it's a little further, down the road or later in the day or something, it's always good to just hit those spots where you got that gut feeling, or you see the bait, or all the signs are pointing to it, like the wind's beating on this point for the past 3 days. I didn't see this fish the first time, but I'm gonna go attack it from the other way and cast out. Or I'm gonna go hit this parallel down the weed line, or if it's rocks, you get a deeper diving crank instead of rubber blades, and you start smashing into the rocks, making some noise. It's just all those little things to do something different and really just stand out from the crowd. I mean, that's what you got to do in a tournament. And I think that's just, one of the ways that we got those fish this weekend, by standing out.
How much were you shaking when that first fish hit the bag?
Well, I a lot of times deal with musky blackout. I know we were kind of talking about on the phone today a little bit on the second fish this morning, and I think I said almost everything wrong. You're like, no, the fish did this during the fight and this and that, and it got in the bag, and this. And I was like, well, I don't really remember that. It's just I just blacked out. But I was shaking.
I was nervous to net it. I was shaking even just netting that fish.
I don't even remember like the shaking, but I know it was happening because I was like moving all over the place. I'm like, okay, bump board. Okay, get the stickers out. Okay, grab my phone. We got to call Tim. We got to get the good pictures. We got to put the fish back in the net. All these things are just running through my head. Like it just happened, because when a bite window happens, you got to get right back after it. Unfortunately, that never really held to anything this weekend. I don't think we did much after each fish catch, but either way, it's always good to kind of get that process done and through pretty quickly.
So I think we ended up fishing that area for a little bit longer, and then ultimately made a move down to an area that I had raised a fish pre-fishing in. And Gus, I'm gonna let you talk about this because I think you'll do a better job at explaining it. Really weird thing we stumbled across mid-tournament that we had no experience during pre-fishing. So I'll let you riff about it, but that was a very wild stretch of 25 minutes right after we caught that fish. I do want to add too, it's like, well, after you catch a fish in a tournament, 8:30 in the morning on day one, I mean, you're all of a sudden, your brain starts going to the podium pretty much, which is so wrong to do.
We're like, okay, which fish do we go back on now? Like, we're going to go to fish waypoints now.
the confidence was way too high. And obviously, as everyone knows, that's listening to this, musky fishing is extremely humbling. But we were like, all right, we were like five. We need five fish. So we
Yeah.
were setting some lofty goals. But yeah, anyways, sorry. Kind of explain that next spot because that was probably the most, I don't know, quote unquote action without catching anything that we experienced for the next 2 days.
Yeah. I mean, not very often do you get like 4 follows in the span of like 15 minutes or something ridiculous like that. I mean, I know people have had crazy stories of doing like back-to-back massive fish, which I think the winners actually went back-to-back with their 52 and 3/4 and like a 44, which is insane. But
Yeah.
the reason we moved these, which was kind of something that I don't think anybody in the Northwoods can experience because we don't have floating weeds. And we pretty much go to this next spot where I think Max raised one fish. We might have seen another or something. I know we were running live scope and on pre-fishing, and we had some fish kind of come up and go away before they got in the 8. And it's always hard to tell if they're pike or not because we caught so many pike during the tournament. So I think I put down waypoints anyways, but it turns out a lot of those muskies were in the same areas the pike were, which is usually not the case up here. But anyways, we go down to the spot. I think at this point the wind had kind of halted a little bit. It might have been coming just from a different direction, and this spot was calm. It was a popular spot, but there's floating weeds everywhere. Like there's this whole strip of floating weeds along the whole area that we wanted to fish. And I kind of got there and I'm like, uh-oh, like, is this gonna cause a problem with running our baits clean? So we just kind of started tossing at the edge of them, and then we realized that there's kind of pockets in there, but we're still in like somewhat deep water, and we were just, I think we were both running tubes at this point because they're getting the cleanest cast through these weeds, and we started working them in the middle of this floating weed bog, basically. And while we're doing this and getting in there, we're watching like 3 boats around us. They'll come flying up into this weed thing trolling, and they go skirt and stop bringing their trolling rods. They're like clearing them, and then they just get out of there. And I see this casting person just go perfectly way around it and then go back around because they're like, I don't want to go through that.
Yeah.
We moved 4 fish directly in the center of that thing, and we really think that they were using the floating weeds as cover, which was,
Yeah, that was crazy.
I mean, it might not sound crazy to some of you guys. A buddy of mine told me he watched a thing about Jeff Hansen, one of the main guides down there, talk about using like big joes and tubes without front hooks and tossing them up as high as he can and then letting them plummet down into the weed, like the floating weed pockets, and then ripping them out of there. We weren't exactly doing that, but we were still kind of pitching. And I think we raised 2 that were in the low 40s and 2 that were in like the mid-ish 30s. And those waypoints were just peppered in there. And we're like, okay, this is awesome. Now we have a ton more fish to go back on. We know right where they are. They're in this one little area. I mean, you could just spot lock and cast in a circle around the boat and hit like 3 of the 4 of them. They're that close. And on Saturday, there was a really big wind shift. And I don't remember if it happened while we were there because we kind of sat there a while. Because in a tournament, it's, we like to just sit on spots. If you know there's fish there, you just pretty much wait until they bite. And
That wind shift happened almost right after our like
That's
first
right.
and a half time through the spot.
Yes, we were going through the second time, and then the wind shifted enough to start just pushing these weed bogs out to the middle of the lake, and they just totally disappeared. And so did the muskies. We never saw them again on like our second pass, third pass, fourth pass. Never saw them on Sunday. What's that?
They vacated. Yeah, they just got out of Dodge.
Gone.
Yeah,
So
that
that
was
was
nuts.
unfortunate because those were some nice fish to go back on. So if any of you out there have experienced that, we'd really like to hear that because that was just something wild. And I don't know if I've ever heard of something like that. It's not something we're used to up here at all. I mean, we don't get that many floating weeds, to be honest. So
Yes, I mean when that happened, and that was obviously we spent some significant time in that area. I don't know about you, but I think at that point we were feeling a little bit, the adrenaline had kind of worn off from fish number one. We were anticipating getting some clouds that day that just like you could see them out in the distance and they just were not coming. That sun was just beating down. The wind was, whatever. It would pick up, move some stuff around, and then it would lay back down and it would just feel atrocious out. It's a Saturday in Madison. You got people banging Taylor Swift on their docks. You got people playing some shitty rap music on their boat, like, 40 feet away from us. You got jet skiers flying around you. We got pan fishermen staring pins and needles through us on
I'm
every
about to
single time
die
we
of
get
heat
within.
stroke.
Yeah, yeah. And like it just, it became a Saturday in the summer, and the muskie tournament was like going on the lake, but the lake was just having a normal day, and shit just got tough. Like it just felt, I don't know. I'm sure, fish were still obviously being caught throughout the day, but I think from what it sounded like, and when people caught fish that day, and kind of what we were talking, like when we were talking to people after at the first kind of recap night, like the bite just shut down.
Yeah, I think there was a cap at like noon or 1, and then it was just like nothing.
Yeah, I mean we had
Uh,
that one fish, and we got a text from the tournament director at 3 p.m. The tournament didn't end till 4, telling us to come to the area that they're going to interview the top 10 teams. And we were like, did they text us? Like, did they text us to everybody, or what? Like, what is this about? There's still an hour left. Like, are we real? How
yeah,
can
we're
they
trying to
even
catch
say
another
that?
fish.
Yeah, like how can they even say that we're still, how do they know we're in the top 10? Like either there's been no fish caught today, or like they screwed up. And yeah, I mean, I think in total there was 17 fish caught on Saturday, and the bite just, I mean, it just vacated on both lakes. It seemed like afternoon.
Yeah, I don't really know exactly what happened there. I think there was like an afternoon moon phase, but just nothing was going on. It did truly feel dead. So I think that kind of concluded Saturday, and then seeing that we were invited, to the top 10 recap, that was, good to hear that we were able to make it with our one fish. I mean, because like we were saying before, we thought it was going to be a shootout, and then we find out that it was a tough day for a lot of people, and we're sitting up there with, our 41 and 3/4 and a bunch of fish moved and a bunch of fish to go back to. I mean, we're feeling pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, Saturday ended up being a freaking grind. Like I was saying, with all those, a lot of action on the water, and I mean, like action as far as like pleasure boaters and stuff like that. And the heat just got outrageous. I think we both kind of were hitting some breaking points mentally of just like, what time is it? Is it almost 4 yet?
Yeah.
And like, we kind of started getting loopy where, for the last like 20 minutes of Saturday, I just kept shouting miracle fish because I was just
Yeah.
praying that we could get, because I think, after we caught it at 8:30, we like stamped in a second fish that day, which is just so dumb. I mean, we were riding high. We should have known, like the flip switches on and off so easily in this sport, and that happened. But yeah, like you're saying, we felt good about our day, like especially after seeing the results, where we're just like, well, shit. I mean, we're in 4th place and we have some fish, like you said. So Saturday night was the same game plan, drank some beers, ate some Chipotle, watched some hockey, and went to bed super early. And think we were very well prepared for what looked like, via the Weather Channel, that it was going to be, if we thought Saturday was a grind, Sunday was going to be a huge grind.
Yeah, we really didn't know what to expect Sunday with that just kind of intense cold snap coming in. And I really don't, I mean, some of the other anglers could have been lying. I know I wasn't at that recap when I said I have no idea what to expect on Sunday. A few of them were saying the fish could push out deep, they could stay where they are and just hunker down, or they could all push in shallow. We really don't know, but all we know is that it's going to be gnarly, cold, windy, rainy, just all of the above. I mean, like I said, with those fish pictures, you could have fooled me and said all these fish were caught in November last year or something like that. But we, with our experience, I think we both agreed kind of right away to for sure, obviously go back on fish waypoints. And in general, which was actually a very good thing, most of our fish that we moved and the one that was caught on the first day were pretty shallow. And shallow is a relative term. When I'm talking shallow, I mean shallower than probably 98% of the people out there were fishing. I mean, we saw a ton of trollers and they only trolled deep. There was a ton of casters just bombing casts out. I don't know if I said the weed edge was at like 11 where it's thick. They were out there in 15, 17, 20, just bombing casts out there. And we weren't, and we felt like we had a good idea that this cold snap would just hunker the fish that we were moving right where they were or a little bit shallower, making them, I wouldn't say easy to get to because it's tough ripping through some of those shallow weeds, but we're like, yeah, I think we're going to go shallow. I think we're going to fish where we were fishing and just push in from there and kind of reassess after that. So again, we had a good game plan of just going back on fish and trying to kind of get up in the slop a little bit. And well, I don't know how much this would give away the spot at all, but the first morning, or sorry, the Sunday morning, we decided to go to where we moved a bunch of fish and we couldn't hold there for much longer than 30 minutes, 25 minutes. I don't know.
If that, we got the shit kicked out of us. I could
That
barely
wind
even make a
was,
cast on the front of the boat.
yeah, that wind was pounding in there and we were getting some clean casts. We didn't get any bumps. We didn't get any follows. And then I was trying to kind of, I mean, I kept my Tarova at like 7. I don't know, something crazy like that. And the wind gust would push the boat to going 0 miles an hour. And then also I'd jump to 1 mile an hour and then back down to 0. And the boat would be going up and down and the trolling motor would be popping out of the water. And I'm trying to get up in the really thick stuff and I'm getting a weed on every single cast with my tube. And even though it was like during the morning major, I was like, dude, we gotta go. We like we know there's fish here, but I can't get an effective cast out. Like it's not even worth it.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I was like, say less, put the bait on my rod. I was like, let's get out, let's get the hell out
Let's
of here. This
zoom
sucks.
out of here. So lucky for all you 620, 621, 622 Ranger owners, you could probably tough that out. And I heard that there was quite a few fish caught in that wind, but we had to hunker ourselves a little bit. But it's kind of a blessing in disguise that we had some fish moved in some less windy areas, thankfully. And that kind of just brought us back to the place that we were finding fish and that's when we just started pushing even more shallow. I don't think we saw a fish at this point. Good 2 hours into the tournament. And when did you catch your big pike, Max, in the morning? What
I
time
think it
was
was
that
like,
at?
I think it was at like 9:30.
No, the fish I caught was at 9:30, and it was before it.
Let me look 1 sec. Dude, I caught that pike at 8 a.m.
Oh, oh, so we were in that area for a while.
Yeah.
Okay, so you caught that pike early. So we went back to this area, and I think actually one thing on why it started bumping up even shallower, even though we are kind of planning on that, is that I finally saw a musky porpoise and not a carp come flying out of the water. And I'm like, dude, that was a muskie. I looked over and I thought I just saw something like floating on the surface. And then I see it kick and swim down. And I'm like, okay, that was just a muskie sitting there and then it swam back down. That like 100%, probably a big fish. It's usually big fish that do that. We're gonna hammer this area. And at this point, when you said 8 a.m., you caught that big pike. It was still humid out, so it felt really, really fishy. And I know you put on an icy 9, which sounded like a great idea. You can tell this on this cool but very unfortunate story.
Yeah, you want to make me relive that? No,
So
it was
sure.
fine, but it was probably the most like disappointing personal best of a fish ever. There's not that many big pike in Vilas County. I mean, there are certain lakes that have big pike, but I've caught a few okay ones, but nothing crazy. And yeah, I was throwing the blade like 3 turns in, just absolutely walloped way out in the cast and felt really good. Fish was staying down. So we didn't get eyes on it. I mean, it would made it like a run, barrel rolling down there. Felt like a really good fish. Felt some big head shakes. 99% sure it was a muskie at this point. So, I'm shaking. And the fish was, like I said, it was bearing down. And as I felt him kind of getting closer to the boat, I lifted up for Gus to scoop him. And it's like as Gus is sliding the net under the fish, I just hear Gus go, "No way." I look down, I'm just
Yeah.
like, you gotta be kidding me. It's just like this 40-inch, just lanky pike with a massive head. It's like I've never caught a pike that big. So that it was really cool. But at the same time, like we were really in need of a fish on Sunday. And I thought I was finally going to be able to contribute after, Saturday. So I was all fired up until that thing slid in the bag. We took a quick picture with it, and then I pretty much just missiled it down back into the water, and we moved on. And I don't think you or I like really said a word for like 6-7 minutes after that, because we were both just kind of like pretty
I,
defeated. Like, what can we do to get them? I mean, at this point, it had been, we fished all day Saturday, we were a little bit in the morning on Sunday, hadn't really seen or had a chance at a muskie. So we just felt like that was it. Conditions felt good, spot felt good. And I think the one takeaway we had was like, okay, I mean, if there's a positive here, it's the area is holding big fish. So let's just stick around again, and worked out.
yeah, I had no words when that became a pike as it got close,
Yeah,
but
that was
we m-
shitty.
we moved on and just kind of kept fishing shallow now that we actually finally laid on eyes on a muskie Sunday, whether it wasn't in a follow, and we never got a follow on Sunday at all. But we're like, okay, they're kind of up in this slop. We can't really rip a tube super fast because it's a nasty cold front, and I don't think we either of us agreed that snapping a tube really quickly was the right call. I think this is kind of when you or I we kind of gravitated more towards like a Medusa, like a shallow rigged Medusa that would kind of hang there. We put on a crane bait, and I think we put on an 8-inch Navin with a weight, which we like to use in shallow weeds to kind of just hang there and be a small presentation. And this is kind of we got a reboost in confidence because it started to get cold and dry out there. Not not dry in the rain sense. There's plenty of rain, but the humidity was leaving the air. You could feel it, and it was just getting bitter cold out there. So this is when we decided to go to that pull pause, hang there in their face type lures and stick to the shallow depth. And we went, I think, a long ways without seeing anything, and then we kind of went back to the area. We saw the fish and got the big pike. Do you remember what I was throwing before I switched?
I can't remember exactly, but I do remember we were a
Oh,
little bit lost as to what to throw. Do you remember?
Suic. Yeah, I think I was throwing a
Yeah.
10-inch weighted Suic, which I also really like in those types of depths. And I saw that you rigged up that all black crane bait. I don't know what they call it for size, but it's the very small, short, fat one that kind of looks like a panfish. It's not the minnow. It's like the panfish style crane. I don't really see too many of those get used, and I think it was like absolute gold for you to buy that one, Max, because we're in Madison. They have a shitload of bluegills, and they love all black lures because it's green stained water. I mean, that's like all I really ever use anyways in green stained water. So I pick up that rod because I think we're just kind of floating in a circle in this area. And I think I pointed out to Max, I'm like, oh, there's this kind of like cool little in cut in the weeds a little bit. Like it was very, very small where it kind of it stayed a little deeper closer than other areas. And I couldn't have been pitching that crane bait for very long, just doing not super long sweeps, not very hard rips, just kind of cool and smooth and keeping it a little bit irregular. And it was coming down hard in the rain, and we each had our hoods completely up. And if I remember correctly, I bring the crane bait directly in front of me, and then I swing to my left. And as I'm swinging to my left, I just see this submarine kind of come up in the line of where my crankbait is and get closer and closer and turn with the bait. And immediately I'm like, okay, this fish is going to eat. I'm going to bring it to this first turn and just let it sit there. Brought it up, let it hang there. I really thought this fish was going to come and pretty much inhale the bait. I mean, at this point, I don't really know how big this fish was because there's waves. It was cloudy. I just didn't get a great look at it because it almost was like coming so low and close to the boat that I had to like peek over to see it. But I didn't want to. I don't even know if I said like Max follow or here's one. I might have, but I don't think he heard me. And when I hung it there, instead of him engulfing the lure, he just like nipped the back. But I kind of saw him eat enough of the bait where I wanted to hook set. And I mean, it's tough. It's an all black lure in very dark water. And I set back down towards me, you know, kind of trying to go set back into the fish a little bit. And as soon as I set the hook, all hell breaks loose. So I'm like, okay, he's hooked. I don't know how well he's hooked though. So that's when
you were yelling, be
I
cooked,
was
be cooked.
I was yelling either be cooked or barely hooked. And I don't think I usually say fish or got one or I don't know. I don't really know what I usually say, but the first words out of my mouth there were barely hooked. So
Yeah.
I was yelling that, and that's when you turn around. I think you just threw a cast out because I know your lure.
Yeah,
Is
like
in the
I
water.
literally chucked the rod on the floor of the boat.
Because I'm just like, I don't care. Grab the net. Barely hooked.
Yeah,
Barely hooked. Grab the net.
Yeah. Sprung into actions, like
So
just
this fish,
panic at the disco moment.
yeah, this fish is just fighting like crazy, where we both could just see the entire crankbait fully exposed. So sketchy in a tournament sense. I'm more so playing it somewhat lightly. I like to keep some pretty hard tension up on it, depending on which way the fish is going. You know, don't try and pull the hooks out of it. I don't usually would stick my rod fully in the water with a beak hooked fish or a fish that's not hooked super well. So I keep that tension. I'm trying to drag this thing up there. And this is when Muskie Blackout 2.0 sets in. I still haven't relooked at the footage yet, Max. You know, I just got home not too long ago. But you had a better idea. Did that fish try and get, you know, into the net once and get out? Was it the
So
second time?
I tried to net it like a total Rick. I tried to net it back when it was backward, like tail first, which is like the biggest no. Don't do it, never worth it kind of thing. Because at that point, like I just wanted to I was like trying to be a hero, haven't contributed shit. I'm like, I'm just getting this damn fish in the bag, no matter how. It can be as unconventional as possible. But I do remember the second it kind of came up, I like tried to net it. And you were yelling, no. And it like it was in the bag and it just fired out of that thing. Like there was no shot I was netting that fish. And yeah, that got really dicey, but it stayed pinned.
Its stomach was just still on at this point. I think I was kind of somewhat prepared for it maybe to go in the net there. I don't know. I don't think I had I didn't have my thumb ready to free spool because I think I was switching hands because when I was still like holding the rod weird from the hook set on the figure 8 with like my opposite hand or something. And I like didn't know if I wanted to switch. So I didn't get a free spool, and that thing took that run out of the net. And I think that's what I'm like leaning over and reaching forward to like not have so much tension because I don't want to rip these hooks out. I think I was using like those, I don't even know the brand, but they're like ultra sharp. I wouldn't say ultra thin, but I think they're kind of along the 1X, 2X heavy, just to kind of keep the crankbait from like, I don't want it to sink. I don't want to use too heavy of hooks. But since it was hooked only on that back hook, that meant the front hook was fully exposed, which is the sketchy part about netting a fish green or not head first. And I mean, it's tough to, this all happens so fast. We each have our hoods up, so it's hard to hear. This is a difficult time to communicate, but I think after it did that powerful run, it kind of swam directly at the boat.
Went under the
It was
boat.
yeah, and it kind of came under the boat and was kind of coming up, and it was like turning to you, I think, towards the front of the boat. And I might have probably said like get the net down or like get ready or something like that, because sometimes you can get those fish when they're right next to the boat. I'm trying to remember exactly how or what I know the fish was netted with the bait still like not going head first into the net. And I think like half the fish was kind of, I don't know. I'm trying to remember. I might have to really look back at the footage, and I'm really I'm really blacking out on this, but I know that that bait got hung on the rim of the net,
Well,
which was
so from my, I guess, vantage point of how I remember it, and it could be different looking back at the film, but again, yes, it was a total cluster. Ultimately the bait, like you said, it got hung on the rim. The fish kind of fell into the net. And it was trying to swim vertically. The bait was still in its mouth, but it was also on the net. So he was pinned to the side of the net. He's trying to get up vertically because he had leverage with the water. And as you were pulling back, I was pulling the net up. So we literally were like bringing the fish up out of the
hoisting
water.
it out of the water, but it was
And then
still
it
in the net.
finally like went straight vertical, but it was on the inside of the bag. And you started celebrating. You're like, yes. And I think I had like a better view at it. And I was like, get the hook cutters, get the hook cutters. Because
Yeah.
this fish still has like leverage if it wanted to actually like, because it was, I mean, I think half of its snout was like out of the net at this point. And
Mm-hmm.
you like ran, grabbed the hook cutters, like just stuck your hand in there, just clipped it, and the fish like falls perfectly into the bag, and we both just like we started
Yes.
hugging and yeah, like freaking out, like, are you kidding me? Did that just happen? Because I mean, yeah, when you catch a fish like that size in the 8, pouring rain, shitty weather, like it's just a whole in a tournament. I mean, it was just such a cool moment, like seeing that thing drop in the net, and both of us just went wild. It was pretty cool.
Yeah, then we really started to know it was real. Um, but yeah, I went in there with the hook cutters and quickly clipped it, and I obviously grabbed the fish and took the pliers and got the hook back out, the rest of the hook that was in there. And it turns out after all this craziness and chaos, that thing was fully pinned, all 3 trebles corner hooked. That thing was
Never
going
was going
nowhere.
anywhere.
That was going
Only
nowhere.
only way that fish would have gotten off is if I would have fully botched the net job. I only half botched it, thankfully.
Oh, so I think we each take a sigh of relief, and it's definitely warmed us up. We're probably very cold at this point. I think I was just drenched in my gear. I know you were too, but the spirits were back to being very high again.
So can I just quickly, because I was DMing with him before the podcast, I just want to quickly talk about a really funny chain of events for that fish to happen. And it totally could have hit on a different bait, but I mean, you were in the back of the boat, and I was fishing out of both sides or whatever, but didn't hit on any of the baits I was throwing. And so that black crane bait was a bait that I'd always wanted. I've seen it online and everything like that, and it's been a lot of the crane baits have been sold out like all winter long. None of the shops like had it none of the shops had them available. And I remember I was listening to like Backlash or some podcast that Jeff Vandermortel was on, and he was talking about tournament fishing, and he was like, yeah, if I ever like really need one more fish or whatever, one of the baits I always go to is a crane bait. He's like, I just feel like I can always pull fish out of, cover, get fish moving with that bait. And I was like pretty bored on a Saturday afternoon, and I kind of had musky fever in like February, and I went to Thorn Bros here in Minneapolis, and I texted Gus. I was like, "Do you want anything? I'm looking for just kind of some unique baits that they might have." And we were talking about, I think, crankbaits, and you're like, "Yeah, if you find any crankbaits, let me know and we'll get a few." And lo and behold, there was one crane bait left, and it was that black crane bait. And the guy was like, "Yeah, we have one crane bait left in the store," and that was it. So it's kind of crazy to think, because we would have never had that lure had I not heard that podcast, then had not been bored on that Saturday afternoon in the middle of winter and gone to Thorn Bros, and they had one single one left. And I don't think a new shipment of crane baits hasn't come in really to any places until like very recently. So we would not have had one for this tournament like that. So it's just kind of crazy to think back, like, without all that, who knows what you're throwing in that scenario? Maybe you still had a tube or a Medusa, and that bait just goes right by that fish's face without him even moving.
Yeah, I think I agree there. That's just crazy chain of events to get that lure on, because that was not a lure of choice pretty much at all going into the tournament. I mean, we knew this was going to
No,
be tough cold front on Sunday, but I didn't think it was going to be that cold and just that brutal to kind of downsize. And I don't know if any of those guys on the who caught the really, really big ones downsized much. I mean, they might have. I don't think they really gave away that much. I mean, honestly, here we don't really care too much. I mean, we like just being open and transparent with like what we're working. I mean, unless I got some top secret thing going on, but no, we did not think that bait was going to come in handy, and it sure did. I mean, that thing is just a nice little bite-sized snack for the muskies, and that just confirmed to us that they're biting shallow, and we're going to stick to it with crankbaits. And I think you threw on then a 7-inch slammer, all black,
real
and we
quick, that
just
fish,
got
just
to
just
work.
to recap,
Yeah.
that fish was 44 3/4. It was a big fish.
Yep. And I had no idea it was that big until I took it out of the net. I honestly thought it was like the same size as the last fish. It didn't look that big when it came to the 8. It fought well, fought hard, but I had really had no idea until I took it out, and I'm like, holy shit, yeah, this thing is kind
Way
of extending
longer.
on us. Yeah, it's really
Yeah.
extending on the board there.
Yep.
Take some pics. Let's send this
Yeah.
one. So yeah, that gave us some pretty good confidence to stay shallow, rip some crankbaits. Like I said, Max put on a 7-inch slammer, I believe, and we just kind of got to work. I think it just still stayed really tough. I think we went to go try one more spot in the wind just because we wanted to kind of like go where we think there was bait fish getting pushed up on really shallow in an area where we knew a lot of people fished out deep. But if we were able to snipe a fish that slid up from all the bait fish getting pushed in, that would be pretty cool. But the same thing happened like in the morning. We just couldn't hold it, getting too many weeds, couldn't like work baits effectively. It felt really good. It felt like if we stuck that out for a really like a longer time for a bite window, we could have found one, but we didn't specifically have a fish to go back on the spot. It just looked really good on paper. So with that, we kind of just decided, all right, let's just go back to the honey hole and keep ripping it in shallow, and we're just gonna try for one more fish. And I think it became pretty uneventful the rest of Sunday morning. I saw one more porpoise behind the boat. There's quite a few people around, and I started pitching back, put a waypoint down, and I think we went over that fish 3 more times before the tournament ended. Didn't see it again. And then it started to get to the end, and we were just exhausted because when we weren't working pull pause baits, we were working baits that pulled hard. So we were not really easy on our bodies at all the last 2 days, and the cold, shivering rain was not helping at all. And I did the old backdoor 40 cast at 12:55. We were gonna call it at that cast, and as I just launch a tube like a country mile, I look to my right because I was casting off the opposite side of the boat. I look to my right behind the engine, and there's like this behemoth big gal that just surfaced like 25 feet from the boat. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. Like I knew we knew they were in this area, and you're showing yourself now. We're gonna put a waypoint down, and we're not gonna come back to you for another, who knows when we're gonna make it back to the Madison chain. But we decided
Yeah.
I reeled in quick. You tossed at it. We didn't get it. It was 12:57. We had to call it. We just didn't want to rush a last fish, or we didn't want to have the heartbreak of not being able to count a fish. So that concluded the PMTT 2023 Madison, and we were still just super pumped about the results that we were able to get out of these lakes. And at first we really didn't know where we were going to stand. We heard some great news that our buddies Jeremy and Trevor Barber stuck a 46.5 on Sunday as well, so that got them a double. I mean, I think they had the 45 3/4 and 46.5. So we're like, hell yeah. I mean, those are awesome fish. You guys, deserve them. I know they really, really wanted to get to the championship. And but we just still didn't know where we were gonna get placed, because somewhere in that tough time of the morning we looked on Facebook, or Max, you looked on Facebook and were like, oh, there's some big ends caught today. Like they showed off the 51.5, the 52 3/4, saying that no fish under 40 has been caught. There's some doubles, and we're like, wow. Thankfully we got that second one in the bag, because that could have been heartbreaking, not being able to get in on the podium. But we went to the recap event, found out we placed in fifth, and that was awesome. That was pretty much the end of it.
Yeah, I'm really happy with how we did. I was stoked. I was relieved when it hit 1 o'clock. I ain't gonna lie to you. We were pretty
Me
beat
too,
up.
bro. Me too.
Yeah. So yeah, another really, really fun tournament in the books. It's been a good run here these last few. So hoping to keep that rolling. We're heading to, well, Brian and I got the PMCC championship up in Eagle River in a few weeks, which should be most likely a shit show, but it'll be fun. And then you and I get to go to Vermilion in August, which is a trip I've been looking forward to since the second we booked it. So yeah, that tournament fishing, man, it's just really fun. I know some people are kind of hot and cold on it, but I think, for us, like, we grew up playing sports, team sports, and it's just a lot of fun to kind of reignite some of the competitive juices and, just have some fun. Fishing with you. It's cool to see you in action, getting it done. So yeah, I think, speaking of being relieved something's over, I need to go to bed. I had to go to work tomorrow, and
It's all
we're
good,
getting
man.
close to midnight here, so
Let's
that
let's
might
wrap this
be
up
it.
for sure.
Anything else to look forward to that we got coming up for the pod besides getting microphones? Huge upgrade.
Big time upgrade. I know we got some guests lined up. I think we'll keep them. I think
Top
we'll keep
secret.
them. Yeah, I think we'll keep them top secret for now. But as always, stay tuned. Appreciate all our listeners. Thank you for all the feedback. We really love to hear it. I mean, if it's good or bad, let us know. I know one of them was Mike's. I hope this fixes that. So yeah, if you got the feedback, just let us know. I'll give my socials real quick before we head out. But yeah, had a fun time chatting with you, Max. As always, that was an awesome tournament, and I'm just really looking forward to the next one. Let's just keep the ball rolling and strike while the iron's hot. So
All right, brother, man. I'll see you soon. Have a good week. Good luck at Monday Night Muskie League tomorrow night. You're back at it. I'm pretty excited for a break. I know my back's pretty excited as well.
So yeah, before we go, I'm just gonna quick give my socials out. I still have some times here in the summer. If you want to book me for a guide trip on Instagram, it's Suggs Fishing. You can find me on Facebook at Suggs Fishing Guide Service or add me as a friend. You can also contact me on my cell phone, which is 920-264-3816. Give me a text or a phone call. If I don't answer, just leave me a voicemail. And be sure to check out my website. Gotta appreciate Jeff Lang for doing that for me. And definitely go check out the Muskie Metrics app. I know that's kind of been helping us this year on just dialing in bite patterns throughout the day. But website is www.sugsfishing.com. So be sure to check that out. And as always, thank you guys for listening. We don't have Brian here to say goodnight to y'all. I know you all missed that, where he just rambles for about 12 seconds, but we'll see you guys on the next pod.
All right. Take care, man.